There's no question that, everybody's top priority is going to be council's top priority, which is ensuring the public safety and meeting urgently needs that are happening, all over the city, but particularly in the blocks that are most impacted by gun violence. Every single Philadelphian deserves to live their lives free from the threat and fear of gun violence. And that's why we've been calling for a laser focus on the 57 blocks, 10 zip codes, and 25 schools that have been most impacted. And, we want to address violence at its source. I think a lot of people have heard stuff about, policing, but the reality is we have more money in our policing budget than at any time in history. We have expanded the policing budget by over 25%. If it was just based on the budget, we should be the safest city in America. And that is clearly not the case right now. So, we need to continue on with things that go beyond policing. And that is particularly why we want to address violence at its source. We can fight back against the gun violence that's devastating communities by strengthening communities themselves. And that's why we've been very active on, targeted campaigns around getting equitable city services into places, cleaning up vacant lots, repairing street lights, picking up trash. We want to make sure that young people in particular are being cared for and served. And so we really do need to keep our institutions that serve young people open. That means I have a focus whenever the school district says that it's closing, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But our rec centers and libraries need to be open. We need to think about before and after school activities, particularly in those places that are most impacted by gun violence. And we want to make sure that we secure safe corridors to and from school for young people who are traveling on their way. And finally, we have been taking a targeted look at young people who are most likely to harm or be harmed. And so we've been working closely with our city agencies on a pilot discharge program for young people who are leaving the, different detention centers, going back into communities. We want to make sure that they are, that their needs have been met, that their families have been engaged in an exit process, a discharge process, and that there is a plan to move forward rather than simply discharging young people at random points of the day. We want to keep track of the young people who are articulating a cry for help or who we believe need to be carefully, cared for and make sure that they are on the right path. So that's one of the things. The second thing is here we are at the beginning of a school year, and school started as any schools should be able to do before Labor Day. But by the second day of school, half of our schools are closed already because the buildings can't handle the heat. No child should go to a classroom where the temperatures can reach 90 degrees plus. But we need to figure something out. I worked really hard in 2018 to make sure that we would have a plan around air conditioning schools. And unfortunately, I do not think that the school district has held to that kind of plan. We saw schools both at the end of last year and at the beginning of this year whose air conditioning situations were easily or relatively easily remediated. It wasn't because there was a massive problem with the building or anything like that. So we need an aggressive plan to make sure that that is the case. We want to make sure that we have school safety zones with increased police patrol around schools in violence impacted neighborhoods. And I will continue to ensure that we have responsible staffing in schools, that young people start the year supported with schools and their teachers ready to go. I can't tell you what it means to start a school year where there's constant interruption. Kids can't get their footing on the ground, families are disrupted. So we really need to normalize a responsible, stable school opening. There's going to be so much more that comes into play during this year, but at least promise our young people that, there is stability for them. There's a safe place for them. There's a cool and dry place for them. And there's a place of opportunity for them as well.
When you had mentioned the discharge plan, is that legislation you'll be introducing this fall?
So that is not legislation. We don't actually have to legislate around a lot of things. I don't actually think that legislation is the answer. Legislation is the start of things, especially when there are areas that have been uncharted. Legislation makes a very, very plays a very important role. Legislation plays a very important role on the back end when we know something's working and we want to get everybody else online. But actually, the pilot discharge program for our young people at the detention centers has nothing to do with legislation. It's about coordination. It's about getting multiple agencies together. That includes our district attorney, our municipal courts, our defenders association, a school district probation department, and DHS, and the families of the young people themselves, to come together in a broad-based meeting to ask these young people what it is that they actually need. Are they safe? Do they feel safe when they are discharged? What is their emergency plan before they reach the first adult within the system? Do they have a safe home to go back to? Do they need to be relocated? And we want, an opportunity both for them to articulate concerns or fears as much as we do an analysis from the external about us needing to reach out to these young people themselves.
So one of the key drivers of violence in the city is poverty, and you've championed some very effective housing measures in the past. But coming into this fall, what steps do you think, other steps should council be taking to sort of start to break that 26% poverty rate?
Yeah, well, one of the most important things that we do is that poverty is not just a number. It is not how much you earn in an hour or how much you earn in a year. It is actually a lived experience. And one of the most common experiences of those who live in poverty is an eviction. Evictions are disruptive. They literally come with a knock on the door and everything out of the house, including yourselves and all your most valuable belongings, out of the house within 10 minutes. They are traumatic, and they usually result in individuals not finding better housing. They often find more substandard housing, struggle even more with payments and other types of things. So it's a downward spiral. And, Philadelphia, unsurprisingly, pre-pandemic was the 4th highest evicting city in the country. We did almost 22,000 evictions a year. That's basically 500 a week, 100 a day. Maybe you get 10 minutes in front of a judge to plead your case, even if you even make it to the courtroom. And so we wanted to show what could happen if we made a concerted effort to ensure that actually we don't make evictions the first measure of recourse, but actually a measure of last recourse. And over the last several years, Philadelphia has been engaged in one of the most successful efforts to reduce if not end poverty-based evictions here in the city of Philadelphia. We have reduced evictions by almost 70% in one of the highest evicting cities in the country. We have distributed hundreds of millions of dollars in rental assistance efforts. We have supported housing counselors in neighborhoods to help families and individuals, including landlords, find options to an eviction. And in return, if there is an eviction that moves its way into court, we've reduced the delay time from 90 days to 30 days. So in fact, when evictions do have to move their way through court, we can see a speedier resolution, and we can start to deliver, we can figure out what happens, with families and make sure that we're keeping families stable. So, my interest is that we are going to continue that. We're likely to take a look at the legislation, the enabling legislation that allows for the eviction diversion program, which is, praised by the Biden White House, held up as a model and has been replicated in almost 36 states now. So, it's a good thing that there have been some success stories, some lessons learned out of COVID, out of the crisis that we've dealt with. The other area of legislation that we're going to be taking a look at is around protecting abortion rights in our city. Abortion is legal in Pennsylvania. There's no question. It is legal in Pennsylvania, but all around the country, those rights are falling, and other state legislatures are enacting, I think, overreaching legislation that threatens to criminalize or ask jurisdictions like ours to utilize our municipal services, municipal personnel, city efforts to enforce laws that are not on our books. So we are looking to introduce a package on the first day of council to protect both people who are seeking abortion care and those who provide it. That means protecting their privacy first and foremost, and from those who are either not in their world or from out of state who are seeking care in Philadelphia. We want to make sure that people know that when they come to this city, that their rights are protected, their privacy is valued and upheld, and we are going to protect abortion rights here in our city. And then, finally, we're going to be continuing some of our, on our first day of council, we hope to pass a really important law protecting foster children's rights to getting their due benefits. This is a policy that was here in Philadelphia, but actually exists all across the country. It's not unique to Philadelphia, but foster care children, if they have survivors benefits, they are supposed to be allocated to them. But in fact, most municipalities just sweep them into the general fund. So we're gonna look to end that practice here in our city. We're gonna campaign to make sure that that practice is ended at our state. And we actually believe that our federal government should have a hand in ending that practice and making sure that foster youth deserve a fair shot at independence and adulthood. And if their families made them a promise years ago that they would care for them and that there would be funds that would go to care for them, then it is, by God, our responsibility and our right to do right by them, their memory, and for their children.